I want to speak for a little bit in defense of ethnonationalism. And, the main thing I want to point out is America as presently constructed, according to the ideology that most commonly prevails, is not a nation. And actually, it really can't be a nation, but right now it definitely is not a nation. It's not an ethno-nation. There's no American nation. America is a shopping mall, right? America is a real estate development. It's a bunch of mystery meats who have very little in common with each other, who are sharing a space for, more or less transactional, short-term reasons. And that's all America is. And that's all, certain people want America to be, because they are in the business of mass market capitalism, right? They want big markets with lots of individualist consumers to sell mass market capitalist products to. And nationalism or regionalism or ethnocentrism really kind of get in the way of that. If you're trying to sell to the biggest market possible, you want to break down those barriers so that people are just a bunch of interchangeable individuals, and preferably there's a lot of them. Now, the problem is, that's very hard to defend. That's very hard to get people to fight for. That's very hard to inspire people to protect. Because who cares? Who fucking cares about, the local shopping mall? Or who fucking cares about, the real estate development? Nobody cares about that shit. There's no cohesion, there's no unity, there's no solidarity, there's no identity there. There's no community there. It's just a space for purely transactional interaction among individuals for fairly short-term, self-interested reasons. So you're not going to be able to foster any kind of dedication or loyalty or unity or cohesion or vision or long-term solidarity around that kind of ideal or that kind of vision for America or anywhere else. It's just not going to happen. Now, the second thing I want to say is that white nationalism, there's been a lot of confusion about this. A lot of people don't know what it means, but it's not for Europe. It's not for the world. It's pretty much an American thing. All right. In America, you have all these different ethnicities, including all these different European ethnicities, kind of thrust together. And that's why white nationalism makes sense in America, because the various European ethnicities in America have more in common with each other than with other ethnicities. And so that's why it makes sense to have a white identity in America. It doesn't make sense to have a white identity in, France. You can have a French identity. And so for France, maybe French nationalism is the best path. And likewise for England and Germany and Poland and all these other places. They don't need white nationalism. They already have an ethnicity. They have an identity. And they can work with that. We're trying to forge something in America because, this kind of real estate development model, it's not new. I mean, it has attained a development and, a currency that is new. And there used to be kind of like an ethnic or cultural solidarity to America, a kind of American culture. And there's less of that anymore. And so this idea of America as a real estate development or a shopping center has achieved a new prominence, but it's not entirely new. I mean, America kind of started out as a real estate development. It started out as land, and you're trying to get people from all over Europe to come and develop this land. So it's kind of started out as a real estate development. But now we really have to forge a nation and forge a culture. And that was underway. People were doing that. And then that project got sidetracked for this, civic nationalist real estate development, shopping mall America that really started to come back to the fore about 50 years ago. So the American nationalist project was really interrupted pretty recently for a new project, which is the deracinated individualist shopping mall real estate America. And my point is that's not sustainable. You can't carry that forth into the future because it has no way to resist, China, which does have a national identity and does have national solidarity, or no way to resist, the invasion of parasitic in-groups who do maintain an ethno identity within America. And so who can, carve out niches within America to make for their own. And there's no way to defend against that if you're committed to individualism, because, individually they have the right to do that. And that brings me to another point, which is that individually we don't have the right to do that. White people are really second-class citizens in this country because individually we are denied the right to do that, to have ethnic blocks, to have ethnic identity, to have, to be proud of our heritage and our history. Black people can be proud to be black. Latino people can be proud to be Latino. Asian people can be proud to be Asian. But as soon as a white person says he's proud to be white, then, oh, buddy, get ready, incoming. That's hate. That's divisiveness. That's, racism. And you're going to be blasted for it. So we really do have a second-class status. Everyone else can have their own shit. They can have their own organizations. They can have their own communities. They can have their own businesses. They can have their own scholarships. They can have their own gyms, whatever. We can't. All of our shit has to be for everyone. So it's a real double standard. We are second-class citizens. We do not enjoy rights and privileges that everyone else enjoys in this country. And that's what we're revolting against right now. And it's true that whites still control, let's say the majority of the property in this country, the majority of the wealth in this country, maybe the majority of the political power in this country. And but you have to make an important distinction here, and those are treacherous whites. Those are not normal white people. Those are treacherous whites who are allied with an anti-white agenda. The ones who are in charge, the ones who have power and influence and money, by and large, are treacherous whites who have created an anti-white coalition with themselves at the center and an array of non-white ethnic blocs around them who are ganged up to attack normal whites, to plunder normal whites, to exploit normal whites, and to extract benefits and concessions and opportunities from normal whites. And so why do these treacherous whites turn against normal whites? Well, it's because, they can gain more power and influence by building this anti-white coalition with non-whites than they can among white people per se. And that's why they do it, just for more power and more money and more influence, because it's a profitable course of action for them. Now, I think it's a profoundly short-sighted strategy for them, and it's a very self-limiting strategy because, once, hypothetically, they have destroyed or consumed the normal whites, these treacherous whites who are at the center of this anti-white coalition, they're not going to have anything to offer that coalition. The main thing they have to offer is their in-group privilege as whites that they can abuse to attack normal whites and to make their malicious, parasitic lies seem to be, like legitimate self-criticism or whatever. So they have they have leverage over normal whites, and that's what they have to offer the non-whites in this anti-white coalition. So once they don't have the normal whites to beat up on and to exploit and to plunder, they don't have nearly as much to offer the non-whites. And so their position at the fore of that anti-white coalition seems pretty dubious, and I don't think it's going to last. So they're really painting themselves into a corner. It's a really short-sighted strategy, but that seems to be what they're doing. Now, I said that white nationalism is tenable in an American context, but really even in an American context, there are many white nations. There are many white cultures. You have different cultures. You have your, Yankee Puritans, who are your prototypical progressives. They all come from an upper class English Puritan background, or upper middle class, very educated, very, literate, and they have this kind of participatory democracy model with their town halls, and they all get together and they talk things out and they come to a consensus, and the government is really like an organic outgrowth of the community, and they have a strong community and everything else. And they have this universalist egalitarian ethos, which works pretty well for them because they are pretty much equal. And they have this really, favorable view of government, which again works for them because, it's on a small scale and it, It's kind of an organic outgrowth of their community and its values and everything else. And the problem is they try to universalize this to everyone. They think everyone's like them, and so this shit's going to work for everyone at any scale, and it just doesn't. And that's why they're such a threat, right? Because they try to impose this ethos on everyone, on people who are very different than them. And then you have the Southern culture, which is comes from a much more diverse socioeconomic background. So you have people from all over England, say, and Scotland and Ireland, and from all different social classes, from the aristocracy down to the peasantry. And so you have a much more stratified and class-conscious society. And then you have the Appalachian culture, which is different again, because these people come from, the Ulster plantation, or, the borderlands between Scotland and England. And so these are war-torn areas. And these people were very clannish. They were very independent and distrustful of outsiders and distrustful of authority. And they brought those cultural values with them, as well as their, relatively lower socioeconomic status, to Appalachia. And so they have a unique culture. It's more egalitarian and kind of anarchic, actually, but they are not universalists. Their egalitarianism does not extend to outsiders. They don't think everyone is the same. So, yet another culture. And then finally, you've got the Mid-Atlantic culture, which started out with Pennsylvania Quakers, but quickly started to incorporate a lot of Germans and immigrants from all over Europe, and spread out across the Midwest, still incorporating, Germans and Scandinavians and other Europeans. So you have so many white cultures that, America, even white America, is not a nation. It's at best several nations. And so the only solution is federalism. We need local governments, state and local governments, that let people do their own thing and live according to their own values and according to their own preferences. And so something like the Swiss model is really what we need, where they have an overarching Swiss identity, but it's kind of a civic identity. It's not an ethnic identity, because there are many ethnicities in Switzerland. You got the Swiss, the French, the Germans, the Romansh. And so it's not specifically an ethnic identity, and they have regional cultures and regional variations, and that's why they have cantons. And most of the government functions are conducted at the local level, so that people can conduct them how they see fit. And they have kind of like an overarching umbrella Swiss identity, but they don't necessarily share all aspects of that. They have different aspects that are unique to each locale. And that's what we need here in America. We need a federalism, or like a Swiss model. And because there's so much diversity, even among whites. Now, that leaves open the door for some non-white diversity as well. I mean, obviously, we have Indians. They've been here longer than we have. They're blacks, have been here hundreds of years. They have a strong historical claim to being here. There are some recent immigrants, and I think we really need to clamp down on immigration, because, and this is not specifically because I'm racist, although I am, but, it's not that I dislike this people or dislike that people. There might be some peoples that I dislike, but, basically I just don't want a bunch of random people with random values and random cultures coming in and changing my country in unpredictable ways, and in many cases in undesirable ways. I don't want that. Most of these people coming in are changing my country to be less how I want it, and I don't want that. And I don't think anybody does want that, so we really need to clamp down on immigration. There's a lot of recent immigrants and descendants of recent immigrants. I think a lot of people we can explore, sending them back where they came from, because most of the countries they came from are not terrible countries. China's not a terrible country. Mexico's not a terrible country. Philippines is not a terrible country. So, we need to explore sending them back to some of these countries, because even though it would definitely be a hardship for them, but it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not the end of their life. It's not a terrible fate to end up in any of those places. Those places have all gotten way better in the last 50 years and are continuing to improve, and they can help make those places great again. So, there's not necessarily that we have to be against all non-whites. We need to respect the rights of whites and the ability of whites to organize and to protect their own interests and their own identities, but we don't have to be against everyone else.